We all have automatic negative thinking, and it's just part of our mind, but you don't have to believe everything that you think. You have a couple of choices. Either you can talk back to that voice inside your head that's getting in your own way, or you don't need to listen to it and let it move out of your mind like a cloud.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, whose favorite flower is the daffodil, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me on the latest episode of the Running for Real podcast. My name is Tina Muir, and I am so excited you are here. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope you have enjoyed the first 3 episodes that were released today on April 14th. This is episode 4. We did have, I had an intro episode to myself. I had an episode with Matt Fitzgerald, one with James Dunn, and now we have a sports psychologist and high performance coach, Cindra Kamphoff. She had a huge impact on my running life years ago, which you're going to hear that story in a few minutes. But I thought she would be just the person who could help you too. And what a great way to get us started here on this brand new podcast. I'm so excited to be here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. I hope I'm joining you in a long run or maybe doing some chores, wherever you are. I'm really grateful that you've chosen to listen to me today. So I want to ask you a quick favor. If you do enjoy this episode or you have enjoyed the other episodes, would you mind either sharing this with your friends, family, loved ones, whoever else, or leaving me a review on iTunes, which you can do so by visiting tinamuir.com/iTunes to leave a review or to learn how to subscribe. I will explain both of those there. I don't want to keep harping on this too much, but it really, really will help me so much. I put so much time and energy into this, and I would love to hear your thoughts. So please be honest and please let me know what you think. So before I go on too much, as I know I like to ramble, I am going to bring on Cindra, and you will learn so much from her today. Hi, Cindra. Thank you so much for coming on the Running for Real podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Tina.
I am so excited to have you on here. And, I've emailed you about this, but for those listening, I had this incredible urge to reach out to Cindra when I knew I was starting my own podcast, because when I think back on my life and, the running that I've done, the things that I've done, I've always come back to this psychology thing, the confidence, the mental side of things. And there's been a few people who had a big impact on my life. Obviously, you guys know Evie is one of them. But another one was when I was at Division 2 Nationals. I can't even remember what year it was, maybe 2011 or 2012. We were at Minnesota Mankato. And I remember hearing this talk of this sports psychologist, and she was talking. I can't even remember what she was saying at the time, but I remember it had a huge impact on me, so much so that I waited afterwards until she'd finished her talk, and I went and spoke to her and said I was nervous about my race. And then I remember I went and found her the next day and thanked her because I had such a good race. I finished 3rd, and that was my highest finish ever, and I was excited. And then sure enough, I emailed Cindra kind of asking her if she'd be on the show because, as I mentioned, she did have an impact on me. And believe it or not, I don't know if you were just saying that to make me feel good, but Cindra said she actually remembers me coming up to her. So this is so cool for me to have you on here.
I do clearly remember it, and I wrote your name down after you came and spoke to me afterwards. So you obviously stuck with me as well. And I think what's cool is, for those people who are listening, is you never know the impact that you're making, and you might not even know it until like 5 or 6 years down the road. So I appreciate you reaching out to me and having me on today. I'm really looking forward to it. No,
this is going to be great. And the more I've kind of dove into you and your experience, what you've done, the more I'm excited about this, because I have kind of followed you along the years because, as I said, it did make an impact, but it's been cool to kind of research more. And firstly, I guess for people who don't know, you have your PhD in sport and performance psychology. So, where did it begin for you? Let's kind of start with that. What made you decide to go for sport and performance rather than just, general psychology, or what was it about the sport area and performance?
That's a great question. I think a good place to start. So my experience and, why I studied it was because of my own running experience, and particularly in junior high, high school. I was very, very successful and just a really talented runner. And I remember my mom got me a subscription to Runner's World magazine. And the first article I'd always look, I'd ran to the mailbox to try to find it, and then the first article that I would always look up was the Mind and Body article. Mm-hmm. And so I just got really interested in psychology and used it pretty well, like when I was in high school, and won the state meet in the mile my senior year. I grew up in Iowa, and then got a full college scholarship to run D1. So I ran Division I at the University of Northern Iowa, and I had all these huge dreams of being an All-American and being really successful. And I think actually, Tina, I had the talent to do that, but it was my mind that kept on getting in my way. And so one really, really, really vivid time that I remember was my junior year. And I had spent all summer working out twice a day, running twice a day, just the best physical shape that I've ever been. And I spent all summer training in New Mexico where my sister lived. And so I was just so ready. And my second race back, my junior year, I got second behind an All-American. Her name was Sydney Pounds. And from Iowa State, and everyone was like, Cindra, this is going to be your year. And I thought it was going to be my year. And then the next race, I dropped out. Dropped out. I just didn't know how to handle my mind, and I kept on getting in my own way. And I think that's a great example of actually what led me to my passion now. And I think, everything happens to you for a reason. I think difficulties happen for you, not to you. And I think that led me to where I am now, and being incredibly passionate about what I do and helping athletes in particular not get in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing. And I just love what you just said about, I can't remember the exact word you used, but it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. That is amazing. Can you just say that again for people who might have missed it?
Yeah, I said difficulties happen for you and not to you.
So that is so true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really come to understand that I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for that difficulty. And it's really, really hard just to struggle through times during my junior and my senior year, times where I was ready to drop out. And I didn't have the answers, and I didn't have the practical strategies. And so that's what I really try to do now, is provide practical things that athletes and runners, and even I work with entrepreneurs and leaders and speak to a lot of groups. And I just want them to know, like, specifically what to do when, because I didn't know how to master my own mind, and I didn't know how to master my emotions, and just continuously got in my own way of really my talent. So I feel like I left something there at the University of Northern Iowa, but it's helped me now to be better at what I do.
Okay, great. Thank you for clearing that up. And then, you're also a high performance coach. Well, that's what it says on your website, on your materials. What does that mean for people who are maybe not sure?
Yeah, that means to me that really what I help people do is just raise their game and raise their level of performance and play. So I work with a lot of runners, Olympic runners, some, that went to the trials last year trying to get to the Olympics. And then I work with other pro athletes. So I do sports psychology work with the Minnesota Vikings. So I've developed this niche in football, which is interesting because I didn't play football, but I'm really passionate about the game and just helping people be at their best as most often as they can be.
Mm-hmm. And then what about you? You said, you help athletes, elite athletes, hopeful Olympians, but is it just high level? What about people listening who, are saying, well, I'm a 5-hour marathoner, so I'm not good enough for you to help me. What would you like to say?
I would like to say that I do work with everybody. So I do work with I helped a marathoner last year complete her first marathon, and I work with high school athletes and a lot of college athletes. I do a lot of work with college teams as well, and high school teams. It's really, really fun to do the work. I think my difficulties in college obviously continues to fuel me today. You can probably even hear it in my voice. It's in my spirit. And so that's why I really try to provide some practical strategies people can use. So, and as we're going through the conversation today, I'm hopeful that people can get out things that they can, like tangible things they can use when they really need to. And that's what I would encourage people to listen for is, like 1 or 2 things that maybe they could use to just improve their performance. But also, I don't see sports psychology just as, performance oriented. I think that, what I mean by that is like they're skills you can use every day. And when you use them every day, then they help when you really need them the most.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. And that is so true. Like so many of the principles and things that we learn, we can use in other things. I talk a lot about visualization, and that's something that, I use in running, but you can also use it in other areas of your life. So hopefully you'll see that a lot of these things Cindra and I talk about are not just for running, and they're not just for elites, they're for everyone and everything. So let's just say, so if someone was going to work with you or another sports psychologist, what would that kind of involve? Because I think people, this is just kind of emerging as a field that people are starting to take seriously, but they're not really sure, like, what does mental training or what does working with a sports psychologist involve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we do work in a few different areas. We do work with teams, where I do, for example, workshops with teams to help the whole team better understand mental training concepts and how they can apply it. I do one-time speeches. And so I think that's what a lot of consultants do as well, where they might be brought in with a company or to talk to coaches. Wednesday, I'm speaking to the high school athletic directors in my state of Minnesota, which will be fun. But then you can work one-on-one with a sports psychology consultant or someone trained in the field. And that's really so you can apply the specific techniques and strategies to yourself. And I think that it helps you really better understand yourself. One of the main goals of mental training is really to increase your awareness of yourself and what are your tendencies. And I think that our brain is not made for us to be happy. It's not, it doesn't operate that. It doesn't operate in a way that helps us perform at our best. And so we really have to master our brain and master our emotions and how we react to things. So I think that's what was happening for me in college, is that I didn't know how to train my mind, and so I experienced a lot of worry, just questioning if I really had it, and some anxiety. And so that's what led me to not just perform to my best.
And I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that. We'll talk about that in a minute, about like pressure and, limiting beliefs and things. But just to kind of clarify, so if someone came to see you or someone else, they'd probably have like an hour session once a week. And you said about, most of it is about raising awareness. So it's just kind of like, would it be them kind of asking you like questions about how you feel, and what kind of things could someone expect?
Yeah, that's a great question. My work is a little bit flexible in terms of how often we meet and how regular we meet. But sometimes athletes I meet with once a week, sometimes it's every other week. It kind of just depends on what they need and how long our relationship is, and also kind of what they're dealing with and what they're struggling with. My approach is really to help better understand the athlete and what's going on with them. My kind of structure, the way I do my work, is over my top 10 traits of high performers. And these are traits that you can develop. And actually, you can get this PDF on my website.
Okay.
Just CindraKamphoff.com, or another easy way to remember it is just Cindra, Dr. Cindra, so DrCindra. And those are really the habits that I'm really helping athletes develop. So, like number 3 is helping them master their thinking. Number 2 is having a purpose for why you do what you do. Number 1 is about being gritty and having goals that you're really excited about and then sticking with them. Number 5 is working to control what you can control.
We're no good at that as runners.
It's really hard because you might show up and it might be terrible rain, terrible weather, or I saw one time I was running this 20-mile race a few years ago, actually, and this runner behind me got so mad that the water station wasn't open. Just so lots of things that we can't control when we're racing. So that just kind of gives you a snapshot. But those are the kind of things that I'm working on and helping people really better understand themselves so they can use strategies to improve their performance. And those strategies is really what I teach, is like the how.
So then you mentioned those traits. Is that like you either kind of have them or you don't, or you kind of like discover each of the clients kind of where they are on the spectrum of each of those?
Yeah. And I think like these aren't, and I've been actually talking about them more as habits, because they are things that you develop. When you think about something like mental toughness isn't something that you're just born with. It's something that you develop over time.
Yeah.
And I think, my own story, and I know Tina, you probably have a similar experience where, there are times where you got in your own way, us as runners and athletes and people, that's human condition where, not everything's going to go perfectly. And so these are habits that you can develop. So I'm actually coming out with a book. August 1 is going to be the launch date. Okay. And it's all about the top 10 traits. And there's going to be some really cool things on my website where you can go on there and take a survey about the top 10 traits to see where you are in terms of, and I should correct myself because they're really habits. So, the book title is called Beyond Grit. So the first one is grit, but there's much more to high performance than just grit. It's called Beyond Grit, 10 Habits of the World's Best Athletes, Leaders, and Entrepreneurs.
Oh, I love that. And I'll definitely put a link, and I'll put a link in the show notes to all the things Cindra and I talk about at tinamuir.com/episode 4. So, you mentioned that, and you said about awareness a few times there and just becoming aware of where you're at. But why is awareness the most important thing over just, why does it need to be individually what works for you rather than just kind of, why do you have to be aware of yourself rather than just kind of applying blanket kind of strategies to runners or people in general?
Self-awareness to me is really understanding yourself and your tendencies. And I think runners and athletes and people who are self-aware, they understand their thoughts, they're aware of them, and they understand their emotions and how that leads to their actions. I think the key is you got to know yourself to master yourself.
Oh, I love that.
And to really understand, how you can be at your best more frequently, or something I call in the book your MVP level. It's like when you're really at your best, and what does that look like? What's it feel like? And then how can you get there more regularly? And people, I think, sometimes just think it's like chance when we're there, when we're in our flow or when we're in our peak zone. But there are strategies that you can do that increase your chances of being at that level more frequently. So I think the key is to understand yourself and your thoughts and your emotions. And the first step I would just suggest is listening to your thoughts, and the way I kind of describe it in a really simple way is we all have ants in our mind. And kind of I got from Daniel Amen's book, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. And he talks about, automatic negative thoughts. And that's kind of what I mean by ants. But it gets people's attention. So we all have automatic negative thinking, and it's just part of our mind. But you don't have to believe everything that you think. I think that's really important, that you're going to have self-doubt, but the key is either, I think you have a couple of choices. Either you can talk back to that voice inside your head that's getting in your own way, or you just don't need to listen to it and let it move out of your mind like a cloud, sort of like the more mindful approach. But I think that's really, really important to runners as they're listening, is just be incredibly aware of their self-talk. What are they actually thinking about? What's their inner dialogue?
Okay, so then let's unpack that a little bit more. So let's say someone is thinking, okay, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to kind of be aware of what I'm thinking. So what if they are thinking, when they're running, oh, I can't do this, I'm slow, I'm never going to make it, I'm not good, I'm whatever. Like, what would you like to say to people, or what can they do if they do notice that a lot of their thoughts coming through are very demeaning, very degrading to themselves?
So that's what I meant about you have to know yourself to master yourself. And to me, high performance, and that really means to me, is that being at your best more often as possible, so you can really reach your potential and you can let your talents shine. And so some people have a lot of negativity. There's many reasons for that. But I think at some point you have to say you're done with it. And what I mean by that, you're just fed up with it. And the key is you got to notice what you're thinking about, the self-awareness part. But then, when I need a lot of confidence, or when I have a lot of negativity, I got to talk myself through it. So to me, that sometimes I have to provide myself evidence on why that thought is just inaccurate. And, because we do have automatic negative thoughts, and kind of some examples of that. And in my book, I talk about 10 different examples where, one example might be where we blame others. That's an automatic negative thought. Or when we have these all or nothing thinking patterns. Yeah. I didn't race well there at that course, I'm probably not going to race there again. So when you have a lot of negativity or need confidence, you got to talk back to yourself. And so the way to do that is, how can you reframe it? How can you either provide evidence on why that thought's inaccurate? How can you kind of poke holes in it? Or, how can you just change your lens?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, that's really important in terms of just you being at your best more often. And yeah, we can expand on that if you'd like to.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. Like, how do you go about that?
So I think the first step, again, self-awareness. And then number two, the way I describe it is, I think about the best way to talk to yourself is really in statements like, I will, I can, I am. I am is an incredible statement because it's about your identity. And sometimes we just have to remind ourselves what we are. Mm-hmm. And we forget, that we are resilient, or we are strong, or we are fast, or we are, motivated. And then I will is a statement about, the possibilities. I can is a statement about your potential. So that's why those thoughts are so important. And so when you need a lot of confidence, I think the key is you got to talk to yourself in that way. And then times where, maybe you just have a couple of thoughts and, you can also, besides talk to yourself, you can just let it move out like a cloud. Like the key is you don't have to believe everything you think. And our mind is not wired for peak performance. Our mind is not wired for happiness. So you have to train yourself to think in a more productive way. And over time, it does improve. But I don't think like mastering yourself is something you do for 1 week and then you don't do it a week later, right? It's constant and it's every day. So you can really be at your peak level.
Okay. So then is it, when you said about these kind of statements, is it that, let's say you have a negative thought come in, like, let's just say, I can't do this. Do you say, yes, you can, I'm going to do it? Or do you say, I can't do this. All right, fine, don't do it. Like when you said about let it float away as like a cloud, like how would someone approach one of those statements if they are kind of having it in their head?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that you can do as runners is you can plan out some of the thoughts that you want to have even before the race starts. And let me give you an example. So this is something that I do before every marathon I run. And so like in 3 weeks, I'm running the Boston Marathon for my 5th time.
Oh, great.
So forward to that. So I ran, I think this is going to be my 15th. But one of the things I always do is I plan out, how do I really want to talk to myself? And I know there's going to be some negativity that's going to come in my mind during that race. Like if I'm pushing myself really to my potential, like I'm going to feel discomfort, not pain, but I'm going to feel discomfort and I'm going to feel it's going to be hard. There are going to be parts that are going to be hard. And so how do I want to talk to myself? One of the times I did this, it was incredibly powerful. So a few years ago, I was running the Omaha Marathon and I actually had some statements written out on my arm in marker. Right on my arm. And I felt really, really good for most of the race. And this race, I got about halfway through and my husband was like, oh my gosh, Cindra, you're winning this race. And I was like, oh my God, I'm winning a marathon. How amazing is that? And I just had so much positive emotions and man, it was just like everything that I expected. But as you can imagine, there are times that were difficult. And at mile 20, okay, so I have 6 miles still left to go. Like 3 things happened all at once. And it was like a triple whammy. And so one of the things that happened was, I hit the huge hill. And, my automatic negative thoughts were like, who puts the, stinking hill at mile 20? Who designed this course? So kind of blaming, right? And then my quads started to hurt, and then I'm thinking, gosh, maybe I didn't, train as much as I should have. And then, second place woman, boom, like right on my tail, So all these things happen right at once. And I actually let myself for a while just kind of like the negativity was everywhere. My mind was full of negativity and my husband was at the top of that hill and he could see even my body language. I was running really small and like down. And what I find is when you're really trying to push yourself, your thoughts are going to be a little bit louder, sometimes more negative, because it was a really moment where it was a defining moment for me in that race. So as you could imagine, one of the things I love about running is I can see the direct correlation with my thoughts, and if they're powerful and productive and focus on all the possibilities, or if they're not, if they're restrictive and unproductive, I can see it impact my pace right away. And so I had a decision. I could let that negativity continue, and I bet I would have ran 10 minutes slower that day if I would have, because Like I could feel it everywhere. And I know runners who are listening can relate.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know? Or I could say, Cindra, you don't have to believe everything you think. You got to talk to yourself, not just listen to that negativity. And that's what I did. So I just started, at that time, I had some statements that I knew, okay, I thought, how am I at my best? And I'm at my best when I'm confident, when I remind myself I'm ready, when I'm positive, and actually when I'm just happy. So I just started repeating, I'm positive, I'm happy, I'm confident, I'm ready. I'm positive, I'm fast, I'm confident, I'm ready.
Like literally just saying these over and over again?
Yeah, just say them over and over again. And the thing about running is, it's a little bit different than other sports like baseball or football, where it's just you. It's you. And maybe that's why it makes it so much more difficult to sometimes control your mind, because it is just you. You don't have any other distracting things that are happening or things that are part of the game. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was, sure, it was a struggle to talk to myself like that for a while. But then I just got in the groove and I'm like, I'm confident, I'm fast, I'm ready, I'm fit, I'm confident, I'm fast, I'm ready, I'm fit, I'm confident, I'm fast, I'm ready, I'm fit. So a couple of miles, I started just repeating that. And then guess what? A couple miles, I don't remember, completely in the flow, after I was ready to quit. Mm-hmm. And the last 2 miles are my fastest.
That's great.
It was just amazing because it showed me the power of what happens when you're physically ready, and then when your mind is on purpose. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that it's helping you, not hindering you. Yeah. And you're working to master that kind of 6 inches between your ears. Yeah. And that was the marathon I ended up winning, and it was amazing. Mm-hmm. Because just a defining moment for me. I beat the woman by 5 minutes after she was right by me.
Yeah. Well, congratulations with that. And thank you for sharing that and kind of showing a real life example there for runners that they can know. And just something that you said there that kind of made me curious. You said your husband noticed that your body language was small. And how much of an impact does that have? Like, let's say, you're not feeling confident and your body language is kind of like you said, small and like into yourself, and people behind you, like, can people tell, body language wise that you are struggling?
I think in that moment, people could tell I was struggling. My husband could tell. I think even the second place woman right behind me could tell, because it was pretty defining, mm-hmm. In terms of what I looked like. When I work with teams and individuals, we talk quite a bit about body language. Mm-hmm. And there's some really cool research by Amy Cuddy, and she talks about, you might have heard about it. She's a Harvard professor, and she has a great TED Talk and a book called Presence. And she talks about just standing in different power poses can really help you improve your performance. And I think she talks about if you stand in a power pose for 3 minutes before like a job interview, or I think also in athletic performance, it can increase testosterone and decrease cortisol. And so your body language makes a big difference. I talk, especially when I'm talking to athletes, about how are they overcoming mistakes, mm-hmm. and for runners that might be bad races. Because one of the things that I struggled with in college was I had one bad race, and then I made this inference that like I'm a terrible runner from one race, right? Mm-hmm. But we have to give ourselves some compassion as well. And so there is a productive way to overcome mistakes or bad races. And I think the key is when you do make a mistake as an athlete, or let's say you're given a presentation, the best way is to don't let anybody see it on your body, right? And think you're going to recover a lot quicker, mm-hmm. when you don't show it.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned power poses, because that's something I've been talking about with the people listening and my audience, and you guys who have been joining in on my Facebook live chats or just with me in general will know that I really, really hound on this power pose thing and standing on the start line. I've been asking you guys to use the hashtag R4R power pose to show me what you do. And I'm so glad to hear you say that, Cindra, that's so powerful. And just tell us about that then. So let's say someone is in the starting area, they're feeling those kind of doubts of like, can I really do this? Should I be here? How is the power pose like in the starting area, like looking out onto the course? How's that going to help a runner to change their mindset from that, like, I can't do this, to the, yeah, I'm ready, I'm good?
I think by changing your state or your physiology, that makes a big impact on how you feel. And so the way you can kind of think about it is there's this relation between your thoughts and your emotions and then what you do. And it's circular. So just by changing how you're standing and how you're sitting, it can allow you to feel more confident. And then, at least for me, and I do this every time I speak, for example, I'm very careful with my body language beforehand. And I might even do the power pose in the bathroom. I've done that before just to give myself an extra push in terms of, how I'm feeling. But that's why it's so powerful, in my mind, is because it's like your thoughts impact your emotions and impacts what you do. But, your reactions can also impact your emotions. And then you're starting to give yourself a little bit more confidence. You're starting to think a little bit differently because you just changed your physiology or your state.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. And anyone else who hasn't sent me those yet, you should tweet those at me or tag me in them or something so I can see, and I'll show them to Cindra as well, because I'm glad I found someone else who believes in that as much. And, you mentioned about this positive self-talk about I am fit, I am strong, whatever. Why is it that positive self-talk methods are more effective than kind of if a runner says to themselves, I can't do this? And why is it better to say, yes, you can, you're doing great, come on, you can do this, than saying, you will do this because you're not going to let everyone down, and kind of using very aggressive kind of, we see all these quotes and phrases everywhere that say like, sweat is fat crying, or like go hard or go home. Like, but, those can be effective, but why is it more effective to use the positive self-talk that you talked about?
That's a really great question. I see sometimes people are motivated by just more of, I'm not exactly sure what you'd maybe call it, but forceful self-talk.
Yeah.
And I'm specifically thinking about some of the football players that I work with. And I think especially at the pro level, a lot of guys just have big chips on their shoulders. And actually that helps them perform well sometimes, because it's like, no, I'm going to prove to you haters, that I can be successful at this level. I think you got to figure out what works for you. But, what we know in general is that I'm thinking about motivation and how specifically like intrinsic motivation can be a lot more powerful than doing it for somebody else or for something else. And so, I encourage runners to think about, why do they run? And even just focusing on that can really help release some positive emotions. And it also helps me get out of bed every morning. And sometimes we don't want to go out for a run when we're training. It can be really hard. But I think sometimes we focus too much on how we feel, oh gosh, I feel tired, instead of kind of what we're focusing on. And that's usually because our focus is on how much we're tired instead of the energy that we're going to get after we run. So I think your self-talk is foundational to your performance. I don't think that you can deny that just from the decades of research in sports psychology. But I do think peak performance is more than just self-talk. And that is why, that's kind of one of the top 10 habits and just the only one. And also you might be thinking, gosh, Cindra, this sounds good. I'll try, I am strong, I am powerful in my next race. But what if I don't believe it?
Yes.
I think that's also really important, is that the self-talk's gonna be most powerful when you believe it. So for me, that worked really, really well because I reminded myself of all the times that I have been successful. And I think sometimes, like, what I said is our mind is not, I heard somebody call it like a 2 million year brain last week. It's just the idea is that our mind is made for so we don't get attacked by that saber-toothed tiger, right? It's not designed for peak performance. So you have to train it. And if you don't train it, I think there's ways that you're going to get on your own way. You're not going to be as consistent. You're not going to reach your best as often as you possibly can.
Okay, so then can you give us some more tips or tricks or suggestions that you have for, you keep saying about getting in your own way. If someone finds that they keep doing this and they know they're fit, they know they're running well, but, they're listening right now and thinking, actually, I think it is my mental side of things that's letting me down. How can people get out of their own way and get out of their own head and run to their potential?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, two things come to my mind right away. And as we talk, I'm sure we'll even uncover even more. But I think sometimes we just have to remind ourselves why we're ready. So let me give you an example of me. So I'm training for the Boston Marathon. That's in 3 weeks. And actually, it might be 3 weeks from today. That's pretty wild. Okay. But it's coming up. And just that it's coming up, I feel pretty nervous about it. Mm-hmm. I start thinking, like, am I really ready? Mm-hmm. Have I done all the miles that I need to? Oh, man, I missed that one workout that I should have done. Maybe I didn't do enough 20-mile runs, right? And you can let your mind just go crazy, and you can let it tell yourself all the reasons that you can't.
Oh, so you're saying to allow those to come through rather than like swatting them away?
No, I would say like you should sort them away, but you could let that happen.
Okay.
You could just let your mind just go, through it full of ants. But the key is you have to remind yourself of concrete evidence on why you are ready. So for me, it'd be, well, actually, I've done 4 20-mile runs. This is my 5th Boston Marathon. So, I know the course really well. And I think if you just let your mind go to what maybe seems natural, or maybe another way to say that is, without really working hard, it's likely going to go to the negative. So you have to tell yourself all the reasons that you're ready. Another thing I was just thinking about as we were talking is the second idea that I had come to mind was the importance of focusing on what you can control, which we talked about that earlier. And what I find is that athletes and people in general, I notice this myself, at least once a day, I'm focusing on something I can't control, that I'm upset at what a person said or a person's reaction, or maybe I got cut off in traffic. Mm-hmm. And I have to remind myself that I'm not in control of them. What I'm really in control of is kind of the way I describe 3 things. Your attitude, the attitude you wake up every day with, and you do choose that. And then your preparation, how prepared you are for your race. And then the actual effort that you put in that workout, mm-hmm. or in that race. And that's really all we're in control of. So when I'm working with teams, I actually have the team come up with a phrase that they're going to use on their team whenever they notice somebody focusing on something they can't control. Because this is a regular occurrence. Mm-hmm. I know, once a day I'm noticing myself. And what happens is I see with teams and even with runners, then we end up blaming. Well, there wasn't water at that water stop, or the weather. It was too hot. And sometimes we have to make adjustments to the weather, especially if it's really, mm-hmm. it's a really long race. But also, there are ways that we can react to that. And so we come up with a phrase. So because the acronym is APE, sometimes, teams will say like ape up, sort of shape up, or dominate, or maybe they just, I had one of the pro football players I work with, the first time I met with him, he was completely focused on his uncontrollables. So the weather, how the weather impacted his play, or maybe what coach said one time, how coach interacted with him during the game. And so he would use the phrase C&C, just kind of as he stepped out on the field every time, C&C, just focus on what I can control. Because then we just make excuses for the things interfering with our performance.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that's really helpful, because I think a lot of us are quite guilty of doing that and focusing on the wrong things. And, that's helpful for kind of, like you said, that's how important it is, making sure we are controlling things we can control, and kind of letting go of those things that we can't, and kind of saying, they are what they are. And I know something else people will be interested for me to ask you about is we get a lot of questions about some tricks of like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like you mentioned about the discomfort that runners feel, towards the end of a race. You said feel around 20 miles. So what can runners use if they feel like they never push themselves hard enough when it comes to that discomfort, later in a race?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that trait is actually, or habit is my 7th on my top 10 traits, is that they're comfortable being uncomfortable. And so to me, what that really means is that they are continuously pushing themselves. And I think you can push yourself emotionally, by, let's say, trying new things and pushing past like fear or self-doubt or insecurity. But you can also push yourself physically, like when you're tired or when you're sore. And one of the chapters in my book, I talk about choosing your courage zone instead of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And the way I talk about it is like your comfort zone is when you kind of run small or play small or or you do things like you've always done, or you're just trying to survive, and you kind of let fear overtake your body. And most people kind of live there. They don't try new things regularly. They don't, maybe try a new training method or try this new way of eating, or, we just kind of stay in the things that we've always done.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is to choose something that really builds your courage. And so to me, your courage zone is, where you're running big, you're taking some risks that are going to help you. You are doing things that, you maybe are a little afraid of, like, let's say, try a track workout or try, a difficult workout that might seem a little intimidating, but you do it anyway. And that's where I think like grit and high performance and like I'm really pursuing your dreams kind of lives in your courage zone. And as people are listening, I think the way that you build up your courage zone is actually by continuously doing something new each day, just to get it, because you can build your courage muscles. You can continue to move past your discomfort, either emotional or physical. But to me, it's a choice. And so, I'd encourage people to take the 7-day challenge. And what I mean by that is, could you do something every day that's a little discomforting? So that might be like emotional discomfort, where you're really working towards, overcoming your self-doubt or your fear, or it could be more physical discomfort where, because you're right, like to continue to reach your best as a runner, you have to embrace that physical discomfort. And to me, it's like when I'm really racing at my best, I'm feeling it a lot.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of different strategies you can use. Just choosing to push through it, and choosing to have courage and choosing your courage zone is the first step. But then, there are other things that you can do. You can talk yourself through it. You can see it as a good thing. And your self-talk can be really, really important there as well. I had a runner in one of my workshops one time talk about how when her discomfort appeared, she named it. And she called it like, it's a really funny story, but she said she called it like Giovanni. It's like somebody who was like this like hot runner next to her. And so she'd just say, "Hey, Giovanni, nice to see you, but hey, I can run with you, And so as runners, we do have to push through our discomfort and embrace it, because if you're not embracing the discomfort, I think you're not really reaching your best and you're not reaching your potential.
I love that with the Giovanni. You guys, if you do decide to try that, I like even that what you said about, she said, I can run with you, because if it was someone that you were like really attracted to, you'd say, I'm going to keep up with you because I want to stay with you. So let's have you guys try that and see if it's helpful. And just so I can kind of clarify. So you're saying like with the challenge, or when someone's saying, okay, I like the idea of, pushing myself and getting through that discomfort, but when it comes to that moment in a race, I just can't do it. I just back out. So you're saying maybe start kind of a bit smaller and like kind of build up. So maybe, today I'm going to speak to a stranger in the coffee shop or something, like start with things that make you uncomfortable in different ways. I mean, I think there was, wasn't there a guy a few years ago who did some kind of thing where every day he had to do something that he was terrified of for like a year? I feel like that was something that did happen. And if it did, I'll put a link in the show notes, which again are at tinamuir.com/episode 4. But I feel like that was something, but that's what you're saying, correct? That people can kind of build up slowly, and then you'll get used to kind of pushing yourself in different ways.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's really a decision, if especially, I'm also thinking about the discomfort that people can have in the race, and that pushing through that discomfort obviously starts in your training. So when you really want to push in that final 100 meters, let's say, or that final mile of a marathon, if you haven't done it in training, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So you can build up that courage muscle in your training, and that's really key. And then you can figure out different strategies that work for you. What are you focusing on? What are you thinking about? I think the key is welcoming that discomfort, not pushing it away. And, like, let's say, another example of like more of a comfort zone activity instead of a courage zone activity is, let's say you really want to run a 5K, or you really want to run a marathon, but you stop every time your legs are tired, right? Or you stop every time you get to the 5 mile mark because, it's like, well, I can't run 5 miles. I've never done it before. So you either have a choice at that moment. What are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on the possibilities, and how are you going to talk to yourself in that way? And so, you can figure out different strategies that work for you, but it's gonna come down to what are you thinking about? What are you focusing on? And then how can you really work to change that?
Okay. Very helpful. Really great. Just before we get on to the Running for Real 4, you do have a podcast. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about that for people who are interested in learning more about you and the mental side of life, I guess?
Yeah, cool. So it's called the High Performance Mindset, and I started it about a year and a half ago. So we're just coming up on our 100th episode. So that's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And every week I post a short interview that I do on the radio. And so that's just, sometimes I cover a topic from my new book that's coming out, and it's a fun interview style. And then I always provide a strategy. So I'm always talking about like the how. And the book that I have coming out has 52 chapters, so super short chapters that you could read once a week if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And they all include a different strategy that you could use.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I will put, as soon as you have links to the book, once it's available for pre-order, I will put those in the show notes for anyone to listen. So let's go on to the Running for Real 4, starting with, I usually ask people a unique nutrition tip, but maybe as psychology is kind of the focus here, you could share with us maybe your favorite thing you ate before a race, or something strange or funny that you used to eat or still eat as a runner.
My favorite thing to eat before, how about I tell you my favorite thing to eat afterwards?
Yeah, go for it. Love that.
That's really clear. I love after a long run to eat some eggs and hash browns and a Pepsi Max of all things.
Pepsi Max. Probably the sugar, right? The instant sugar.
Yeah, or the caffeine. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Good point. Okay, well that works if it's you definitely have earned it after a long run, so no need to feel guilty about that one. Okay, so maybe you could share a running for real moment. Some moment that you went through that was a really big struggle, and you really found it hard, or maybe a funny story or something real that you've been through here.
I think one of the things that comes to my mind really quickly is last June I was running the Grandma's Marathon. And it fits well with what we've been talking about today. So as it came closer to the race in Duluth, Minnesota, it's a beautiful race along Lake Superior, by the way. It's an incredible marathon. We knew that it was going to be really warm, and it was going to be like 90% humidity. Mm-hmm. So I had to really think about like how I was going to handle the weather, but I also didn't want the weather to get in my way and create an excuse. And so there's a pretty defining moment in the race, and it was actually captured by a photographer. So I had my arms had all my statements on there, like I talked about today, and then I had on my hands my goal time. Just kind of stay focused. And he caught me taking a sponge over my face, and I was so hot and ready just to say, this isn't going to be the day where I'm going to PR, because it's just. I was thinking of all the excuses. And again, I could find an extra gear. The Army and the Navy SEALs actually have a phrase called the 40% rule. And kind of what that means is when you're ready to give up, you actually have a lot left, at least 40%. So I thought actually about that while I was running, is like, I got more here, Cindra, you got more. And I was super close to PRing. I didn't, but ran the exact time that I had before. But it was just really defining in terms of, you can let the weather, provide you an excuse, or you can change your perception of the weather and see that you can still do it.
I love that. Yep. So, and thank you for sharing, and so important to kind of keep in mind. And then, switching the other way, I mean, you might have told us it already. What's a high moment for you, and why did it mean so much to you?
I think the Omaha Marathon story I told you was a really high moment for me. It was my favorite moment in running so far, because to me, it was, the struggles that I experienced as a runner in college. Yep. It was just this moment where I was like, okay, I can be a master of my mind. And I couldn't have done it that day. And it was just cool because my parents were there, my kids were there. Yeah. So it was a really I don't know, it's hard to explain it, but it was like all the struggles came together in this like beautiful moment.
Yeah, I love that. And winning a marathon, I've never won a marathon myself, but I bet that's an amazing feeling. So congratulations to you for that. And finally, what do you tell yourself when you're standing on the start line, moments before you go? When those doubts are coming in of whether you deserve to be there, what are you telling yourself?
Yeah, I'm repeating my I am statements, the ones that I have decided to repeat. And I think that's really key, is because if you let your mind just go to chance when you're racing, it's more likely to get in your way. So what do you want to be thinking? And actually writing that out and planning that out can be really powerful, because in the moments where maybe you do have that doubt or you're stuck in your comfort zone and you need to push, either through the emotional discomfort or the physical discomfort, like how are you going to do that? Mm-hmm. And so planning out something that's really going to work for you. And everybody's slightly different, right? So knowing what's going to work for you is really key.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And can I ask you a favor, Cindra? I haven't mentioned this to you before, but as you are such a big fan of the power pose, will you share a photo with us of you doing your power pose so I can show it with the audience? Because I'm sure they'd love to see it. And the more of these we can get going, the better. So
that sounds awesome. Okay. I would totally do that for you.
Great. Cool. I will be sharing that. And you guys make sure you join in. That's hashtag R4R power pose.
Nice.
So Cindra, thank you so much for your time. You did mention your website, and I will put links in the show notes to your website and your book. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, for inspiring me all those years ago, and for coming back and chatting today. It's been wonderful to talk, and I want to thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for Tina for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun to talk with you and connect with you again.
Are you going to strengthen your courage muscles over the coming months? I thought that was so genius the way she worded that, and just such a good way of looking at it, and so much actionable advice there. It really was an enjoyable episode. If you did enjoy today's episode, I am asking you, please help me get the word out. The best way you can do that is to leave a rating and review on iTunes, and I'll explain how to do that at tinamuir.com/iTunes. For those of you who are unsure about my spelling of that with my name, I know that it's my accent makes it a little bit more difficult. It's tinamuir.com/iTunes. And if you do have running friends who Run to the Top fans and maybe don't know about this podcast, please let them know. I'd appreciate it so much. So today was episode 4, and we did have 3 other episodes that were released today. I wanted to give you 4 in one go so that it made it nice and easy to kind of get into the hang of it and kind of have something to listen to on your long runs. So the first episode was a kind of intro and kind of what running for real is really about. So if you want to skip over that one, I understand, but I hope you will go check that one out. Episode 2 was with Matt Fitzgerald, where we talked about nutrition. Episode 3 was James Dunn, who talked about staying injury-free, and this was episode 4. So I hope you have enjoyed those. I have really enjoyed these interviews, and I hope I get to know you a bit more soon. Please reach out to me if you have any comments or feedback. I'd love to hear from you. My email is tina@tinamuir.com. And remember, the show notes for today can be found at tinamuir.com/episode 4. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great week of running. I will see you again next Friday.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.